A very warm welcome to our viewers for joining us for this special presentation on Other Derana News Channel. Today we are going to dive into the vibrant world of theatre, its challenges, innovations and the stories that connect us all. Joining us here at our studios today is someone who has been at the forefront of shaping this scene. Mayaan Haputantri, founder and artistic director of Clutch Place Theatre and the first theatre director from Sri Lanka to work at the Royal Court in London. Mayaan, welcome to the program. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Mayaan began his theatre journey at Royal College, completed an MFA in theatre directing at East 15 Acting School in England, and has directed acclaimed productions including Boys Play, Tiny Beautiful Things and 12 Incompetent Jurors. Beyond directing, Mayaan also runs workshops for schools, universities and professional performers. From your early days where you started acting at Royal College to the international stages where you have performed, you have consistently pushed the boundaries of storytelling and theatre making. So before we dive into these big productions, I would just like to ask you, what first drew you into theatre and what made you decide that you want to make a career out of this?
So I got into theatre in 2014. I was just playing football in a park with my friend actually, and he just said, come and join our show because it's fun. So I just thought I'll give it a try, and why not? And me being me, I have a bit of a obsessive personality. So even if I'm not very good at things, I tend to get very hyper-focused on things, and then I tend to improve very fast over time. So in 2014, I played like an ensemble speaking role in our school production. And then in 2015, I was playing a supporting role, and then by 2016, I was playing the lead role in school. And then it just kind of continued from there, because in 2017, I became an assistant director for our school, and then in 2018, I was the director of the school, and then eventually, everything else kind of happened.
You became the first Sri Lankan to direct at the Royal Court Theatre, and that places you within one of the most influential spaces in contemporary theatre. So what did that moment represent to you personally, and what do you think that achievement signals for the Sri Lankan theatre in the long run?
Okay, so personally, I was just finishing my MFA in London at the time. So I was planning on coming back to Sri Lanka and doing all my work here. So in general, it's extremely difficult to work in subsidized theatre, and that means working in theatre in which you're able to kind of earn a living. So it's the same both in London and in Sri Lanka as well, but I had kind of settled into the idea that I will come back to Sri Lanka and work for very little or sometimes not much at all. So when the opportunity came up, I just applied for it because I thought, why not just give it a try? And magically things worked out and I got the job. So it was kind of unbelievable, like it was very surreal, like I didn't quite register that this is actually real for a little bit. But I think what it represents to me is, first of all, a lot of validation and knowing that Sri Lankan directors and artists are right up there with the best in the world. Like we can do it, like we do belong in those fields and spaces in a way. And what was the second part of the question?
What do you think that your achievement means for the Sri Lankan theatre in the long run?
Okay, so I think it's always great when there are the few privileged people who are able to go out and get into these spaces, are able to come back and kind of share the knowledge and experiences that they gain across those potential years and months working in the craft. So for me, I'm hoping that whatever I'm able to gain across the next year, I'll be able to come back and somehow invest that back into Sri Lanka to hopefully bridge the gap between where Sri Lankan theatre is now and kind of where we want it to be in 10, 20, 30 years from now.
On that note, having trained and worked internationally, which lessons or practices have you brought here to Sri Lanka to enrich the Sri Lankan theatre?
I would say artistically, the number one thing I really learned was that there's so many different ways to do it. There's no right or wrong way in creating art in general. So that was a unique experience that I was able to have just by being able to experience and see those things. I think Sri Lankan theatre in general, at least in English theatre, we are a little behind when it comes to having sort of ethical, consensual kind of standards in a room. So it was very interesting for me to be able to bring in like more safety practices into a room and how to make people feel very comfortable and very safe so that they can do very dangerous work comfortably, if that makes sense. So a little bit more of where I guess the Western world and the kind of leading theatre practitioners handle specific, potentially touchy subjects and themes, and the maturity and the freedom in which they handle it was a skill that I was able to kind of bring back.
And having worked and trained both in Sri Lanka and London, how would you compare the standards, that is, what the audiences expect from the practitioners in these two contexts?
So I think a lot of people won't expect this, but the standard of theatre in Sri Lanka and England are not so different. Wherever you go in the world, there's going to be a lot of poor theatre, a lot of bad theatre, and there's always going to be a bit of really, really good theatre. And that's the same in London, that's the same in Sri Lanka, that's the same everywhere. I would say the biggest handicap that we have as Sri Lankans or in Sri Lanka is that we do not have as much supporting structures in place. So if I want to be an actor and I want to learn a certain method acting technique or whatever it may be, I do not really have the places which I could go and learn it. So I would say in terms of like learning technique and training and schools, we are a little bit lackluster and a little bit behind. But in terms of talent and passion and kind of like having a unique story to tell, we are just as good as anywhere else in the world.
You mentioned about the schools, and you began your journey as an actor during your time at Royal College. But I think nowadays school theatre is often treated as an extracurricular activity rather than serious training. So how important do you think school theatre is in shaping future practitioners, and what is lost when we fail to take school theatre seriously?
So I think the brilliant thing about school theatre is that anybody can just come and try and perform and see if it's for them or not. And I think if you're a student, or maybe more importantly, if you're a parent who's thinking about maybe should I let my child go and try to join a theatre production for a year in school, even if that child or even if that person does not want to become an actor or a director or a designer or whatever it may be, there are so many skills you gain from doing a show that are able to kind of have a positive impact in your life. So this is in terms of being more expression, like full of expression creatively. This can be more about teamwork, how to handle yourself in a room, how to deal with uncomfortable circumstances, and just being confident and knowing how to put 110% of yourself out there. And I think when it comes to people who are trying to be theatre practitioners or actors or directors, it's very interesting because I think there's two ways about it. I think one is sometimes if you do a lot of acting and theatre work when you're in school, sometimes you can burn out, because as Sri Lankans we always do way too much when we're in school. We do 101 extracurricular activities. So that's always a bit of a challenge sometimes. But I think for a lot of people it gives a nice opportunity to just try something. And I think always when it comes to things you're passionate about or potentially good at, it's just about trying things and seeing how do I react to this and do I want to do this for a little bit longer.
About being passionate about something and pursuing your passion, Clutch Plays was founded during a particularly challenging period and during the COVID-19 period. So what was the vision behind starting your own theatre company at that time? I believe it's because this is your passion. Because
So yes, 2020, during COVID, obviously all the schools and all the theatre productions all shut down because we weren't allowed to do anything. And at the time, I was working with schools and things like that, so all of that came to a halt. So I think about 7-8 months into COVID, I was feeling very, very empty, and I just really wanted to do some theatre again. And I always had the dream of starting a theatre company, and I think I always told myself that I'll do it one day when I'm wiser and older and I'll know how to do things. But my friends basically said, like, why don't you just try now? Like, why not just give it a shot now? So even though it was the worst time to start a theatre company, we just thought, why not? So I kind of gathered some of my closest friends and we started the theatre company. And I think at the time, the main reason that we want to do it, and I think this is still prevalent as to why we still do theatre today with Clutch Plays, my company, is that we want to make at least one person leave our show feeling a little bit better than when they walked in, or feeling inspired or changed in some sort of positive way. So a lot of our shows kind of tackle contemporary, social, maybe relevant issues that we as Sri Lankans in our society feel in a certain way, and sometimes maybe we don't talk about as much. So we kind of covered things about certain aspects of mental health and loneliness. We recently did a show about bringing awareness to cancer. We've also done a show about sexual violence and assault and things like that. So we just hope that we are able to leave a tiny positive ripple in the world through our work, really.
It's time for a short break now. When we return, we'll dive more into the productions of Mayaan Haputantri and the values, challenges, as well as the future of theatre in Sri Lanka. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are in conversation with Mayaan Haputantri on theatre, artwork and its role in Sri Lanka today. Now let's explore more into the productions of Mayaan Haputantri and the broader challenges and the unique value of theatre. Your work ranges from classic adaptations like Macbeth to contemporary, more social-themed productions. How would you describe your creative voice as a director today, and how does it guide your approach to such diverse material?
Okay, so when I started doing theatre directing work, it was a lot of Shakespeare, because I was working with my school on the inter-school Shakespeare drama competition. But I think once I started working with clutch plays, all the stories became a lot more contemporary, because I think it changed from becoming about doing the best classical production you could for a drama competition to about what kind of shows and stories will be the best value addition for an audience. So a lot of the time this became like very contemporary stories. So I would say the kind of stories that I like to tell, and with clutch plays, are kind of stories that I like to say are tugging at the heartstrings. So it's going to be making you kind of feel something. Because I think like when you're able to feel empathy for a character or for a circumstance or for a story, then you're able to connect with it a little bit better. So a lot of the times it's going to be contemporary stories which are going to be kind of heart-wrenching a little bit to watch sometimes.
With your own theatre company, Clutch Plays, I think building a full-time career in theatre remains challenging both in Sri Lanka and abroad. So what has been the most difficult realities of building and sustaining a life in the arts?
I think, unfortunately, doing theatre and arts in general has become a thing which you need to be very privileged to be able to do. Because I think with the realities of the world and having to work full-time jobs, and sometimes maybe multiple full-time jobs, and having commitments to see to as well, it's not very easy to commit time to an art, especially one which doesn't pay you well for the most part. So I think if there is anything else in the world you like doing, please do that instead of doing art. I would always say that. But if you feel like this is the thing you need to do, I feel like you need to be able to commit to living a lot of years, a lot of time, being unemployed, and kind of being a stereotypical struggling artist where you kind of have to work kind of multiple jobs to stay afloat because you aren't going to be making much money doing the craft unless you're very, very privileged and lucky in the first place. So you just need a lot of love for the craft and I guess support from your surrounding circumstances to be able to keep doing it. Because I think a lot of people who get into theatre and hope to do it full time, whether as an actor or a director or designer or whatever it may be, eventually kind of leave the field because it's very financially unsustainable. So I think give it a good shot, and you need to be a little bit insane to be able to give it a good shot.
Looking at the current landscape for somebody who is passionate about arts and culture, for them to pursue their passion, what structural or cultural changes do you believe are necessary from your perspective for Sri Lankan theatre to grow sustainably and for more youngsters, rookies to join in and pursue their way forward?
Ooh, that's a very difficult question which I can talk about for a very long time. I think structurally, probably a lot more funding into the arts needs to happen in Sri Lanka. So I would say English theatre and and Sinhalese and Tamil theatre are all very, very different from each other in Sri Lanka. So English theatre, it's quite a limited audience because not everybody in Sri Lanka speaks English, and also the kind of audience that follows theatrical productions in English are also quite limited. So even if you work for months on a really great show, sometimes within a week you're kind of done with the run. Everybody who kind of wanted to see it has seen it already. So it's a lot about giving people the opportunity to join in the arts when they're young, to be influenced by it, to watch shows, structurally more funding, and I think more structure in terms of education and knowledge, and giving artists the tools they need to succeed in their field. because I think the difficult thing is right now, because it's really difficult to have a sustainable career in the arts, people don't really bother funding it anyway, because what's the point in spending years training in something which you won't be able to make money out of in the end anyway. So it's kind of like a toxic cycle where if you don't fund it, you can't really make money, but because you can't make money, you don't really fund it. So that's a kind of a challenge that Sri Lanka needs to fight soon, because I think the value of the arts is never where it should be with things like this. So I think that's another one. And I think finally also, because in Sri Lanka we do what is called amateur theatre, and amateur theatre basically means that we don't earn a living doing this theatre. Sometimes the culture that is prevalent can be very competitive and sometimes unhealthy. So I think if we can become a little bit more supportive, that is also very helpful going forward.
Moving on to, I think, theatre is special because theatre requires an audience to be physically present and attentive. Do you think this demand or this requirement for presence is theatre's greatest challenge today or the greatest strength?
I think it's a bit of both. I think the special thing about a theatre show is that we put our phones away, we put our screens away, and there's going to be a certain amount of people in a room experiencing something together at the same time. We're probably going to be watching something that's connecting to us empathetically. We're probably going to be thinking about how we would be doing in a certain circumstance. And I think it makes us a little bit more emotionally intelligent. And we are able to have a shared experience, which I think is very rare nowadays. It's not quite the same of seeing a story on a screen versus seeing somebody acted out in front of you in complete realism. And I think it has a power to connect a little bit more strongly when it's happening in front of you. So there's a beauty in the fact that sometimes when a theatre show is done, it's done, and you don't really have a recording or any other way of seeing it again. Because I think we kind of hold it in a very beautiful way. We kind of hold it in a little bit more of a precious way as a memory, like, oh, I was there in that one time that show happened, and no one will ever see it again, but I remember how that made me feel. And I think that we give it a little bit more value because we're sentimental like that as human beings, I think.
As you mentioned, theatre, once it's done, it's done. It only exists at that moment, unlike films or books that can be read or watched again. So how would you, as a director, measure or assess the success and the impact of a live performance that leaves no permanent record?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it depends on...
I think I want to ask whether it's about the response of the audience or your personal satisfaction or maybe ticket sales. How do you measure it?
I think it can be very different depending on the show you do. At least that's how it is for me, because if I'm doing a show that has a very big social impact, sometimes I don't really care too much about what the ticket revenue is or I don't know how popular it was. I think my main goal with a socially relevant show would be a lot more about what kind of social impact it had. Would someone come after the show and talk to me and say like, oh, like I'm so glad that you said this because XYZ, or maybe I will hear maybe like a month or two later saying like, oh, because they watched the show, they went and helped this charity or they joined and did this kind of work in order to kind of make society a better place. So for me, I feel like with purpose-driven stories, it's always a little bit more about what kind of impact you had on the people who came to watch, and not necessarily whether they liked it or they enjoyed it and they clapped and left, or whether it's more about how they changed as a human being by watching it. But I think if I was doing more of like a musical or a comedy, it's a lot more about like how much did the audience enjoy and laugh and sing along and vibe with the show in a sense. So in that sense, I would kind of want it to be big. I would want the audience to love it. I want them to laugh and cry and cheer and do all those things. So I think it's different based on the show and the kind of story you're trying to tell.
When you look ahead from where you are, now that you have been trained abroad and now you are here in Sri Lanka, what gives you hope for the future of theatre in Sri Lanka, and what role do you see yourself playing at it?
So I think Sri Lankan theatre is not short of talent at all in English, Sinhalese or Tamil. I'll speak about English theatre because that's the one I'm operating in mainly. I think there are a lot of talented artists involved in English theatre in Sri Lanka, and especially talented young artists who are passionate to continue doing theatre, even though it's difficult, even though it's insane. So that gives me a lot of hope that we can create a lot of beautiful art and work going forward. I think one of the challenges is that I think maybe post-COVID, we have to kind of rebuild the industry and the audience, because a lot of people who would have maybe gone through schools and been exposed to theatre have not had that experience. So I'd say the challenge is going to be how do you create an audience for the work you do? But the beautiful thing is that there's a lot of people who are passionate and talented to do it. So my hope is after the next year that I will spend at the Royal Court, that when I come back, I'll be able to kind of share the knowledge and the experience that I gained from doing that and kind of bridge the gap between where English theatre is currently and hopefully make it into a better place where maybe someone could eventually maybe have a career in it, maybe have a more supportive, healthy, fun, creative, expression-full place to go to, which I did not necessarily have when I left school and joined. So hopefully all the work we do, all the people involved in the English theatre work that we all do will help make that dream come true in a sense.
Mayaan Haputantri, thank you for joining us and for sharing your perspective on the theatre in Sri Lanka. We wish you all the very best for your future projects.
Thank you so much for having me.
That was the theatre director and founder of Clutch Place Theatre, Mayaan Haputantri, who is also the first Sri Lankan to direct at the Royal Court Theatre in England, in conversation with us here on Ada Derana. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again with another discussion.